Here, I'll put you here. I can put you here, chat. Like that. So yeah, I am not a good reader. I haven't read English, especially out loud, in a while. So if I make mistakes, I'm very sorry. But ow, I will do my best to um, to not mess up too much. And we're gonna do this. Okay, so is this correct? Is this the first chapter then? Let me scroll down to see. Yes. Okay, so this is one chapter then. Okay. I think we can read one chapter. Maybe we will just read one chapter. Maybe we'll just read one chapter today. What kind of background music do we want though? Classical. No lyrics. Yeah, that would be helpful. DMCA free classical. DMCA free classical music. Okay. How's this? Okay. I'm nervous. Okay, I'm nervous. Okay, passerine. It's by, I'm sorry if I misspell this, by Blue Jamas and THC Scots. Okay, summary. I understand you heard the place you loved was in trouble, so you came back. But why didn't you take me? Here it was at last. Catharsis, or something close to it. I would have hunted them down with you, Filza. The people who did that to your town. I would have given you your vengeance on a silver platter. I would have given you the world. Filza didn't look guilty. He just looked tired. I didn't hunt them down though. Oh, I didn't hunt them down though. Or that fig where Techno and Phil are old immortals and Tommy. Okay, so this is just, okay, this is loud. Okay. So this is just a summary, okay. Notes. Technoblade and Filzer are immortals. Tommy and Wilbur are not. Angst ensues. Okay. Okay. Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Like a fox to a burrow. Like an eagle to an eyrie. Summary. The voices led him to kingdoms and shires and towns. It didn't matter what they offered him in return. The voices didn't demand coin, they demanded blood. He fought for blood, men and stupid men, greedy kings and starry-eyed rebels. He fought for armies doomed to fail and dragged them into the light of glory. He had lost count of how many allies he'd fought beside. After a time, their names and faces had faded into the recess of his hazy memory. And there was the Angel of Death. Or entity, empires and the emperors that rule them. Okay. Am I doing okay? Okay. He must have had a life before this. A mother, a father, a home, maybe sisters or brothers. But it had been so long. Too long. And now all he knew was his bloody game. His hands knew no shape or fists curled tightly around the sword, swinging eternally, finding its mask through skin and bone. They all tried to run, of course. They built walls and crowded in corners, but he always fought them. Sometimes they begged, sometimes they chose to jump from cliffs rather than face his reckoning, and sometimes they stared back at him with eyes as empty as his own and welcomed death with open arms. Those were the ones he envied the most. Technoblade never dies, he whispered around campfires and funeral pyres. He prayed that wasn't true. The voices led him to kingdoms and shires and towns. It didn't matter what they offered him in return. The voices didn't demand coin. They demanded blood. He fought for bold men and stupid men and greedy kings and starry-eyed rebels. He fought for armies doomed to fail and dragged them into the light of glory. He had lost count of how many allies he fought beside. After a time, their names and faces had faded into the recess of his hazy memory. And then there was the Angel of Death. He was one of the very few with reputation that matched Technoblades. He'd heard of the angel through whispered stories and snatches of tavern gossip. I heard he has obsidian wings, one patron would say to another over a cup of ale. I heard he once massacred an entire army, all by himself. He makes even the Green God afraid. Technoblade had begun to imagine a ruthless man, an immortal butcher with the same wrenched grin as his. But Filza was not an avenging angel. He was just Filza. They'd met by coincidence in a land of ice and snow. This is too big. This is too much. I'm nervous, chat. I'm nervous. Okay. They'd met by coincidence in a land of ice and snow. It was barren, but they'd made quick work of it together. First as allies, then as friends. Through it all, Filza had smiled instead of grinned, laughed instead of crackled, or on calmer days he'd while away with his tea and chess and silent meditations that quieted the scream in Techno's head, if only for a little while. You know, Techno had said during one of the sparring matches, they had to stay in shape, of course, because peace times never lasted as long as people hoped. The stories never talk about the side of you. Filza had paused, a small amused smile on his face. Oh, he said, what do the stories talk about then? They call you the Angel of Death. Techno dug his heels in as Filza resumed an onslaught of blows with his dull sword. They said you leave a path of destruction in your wake and nothing. Techno parried and went on the offense. That nothing is scared to you. Their blades met. They pushed against each other, trying to gain upper hand, and it was only because they were standing so close that Techno noticed the shift in Filza's eyes. A momentary coldness that was as brutal as the blizzard raging outside. It was there and gone in an instant. Light returned, and Filza laughed as he pushed back against Techno's sword. Stories are curious things, Filza said as he swung again, barely giving Techno time to dodge. Some of them are true. He moved so quickly. Techno could do nothing but stand there as Filza rushed him with a hit to the ribs, knocking Techno backwards into the training room floor. Techno scrambled to his knees, but Filza was already standing over him with his sword held high above his head, his eyes glimmering with an emotion Techno couldn't place. For once in his immortal life, kneeling there in front of the first person he called friend, Technoblade felt hurt. And then Filza lowered his weapon. He smiled gently down at Techno, the soft smile Techno was used to, and offered Techno a gloved hand. And some of them are not, Filza finished. So best of 2 out of 3. Sorry. You're a bastard, Techno said playfully, even as the voices screamed, run, run, run. He took Filza's offered hand and pulled himself up. Beside the man that he was sure could have cut him into two, no matter how dull the sword edge was, as Filza patiently moved Techno through all the things he'd done wrong, small things like foot placement and his hilt grip being an inch off. Techno found it equal parts amusing and frightening that despite his eons of bloody fighting, it took only a few minutes of sparring for Filza to find flaws in his technique. But then again, Techno's technique wasn't particularly polished. It took only one brutal swing to fell most people. Something told him that Filza would be harder to kill than that. Okay, how's the music, chat? Music down a little? Yeah, I figured it was a little too loud. It's fine. Okay. They conquered nations. He had in his golden-haired friend. They were bathed in glory, twin gods shining in the middle of bloody fields. But as their empire grew, so did their enemies. They came in droves, day after day, and before long, Techno had forgotten what peace tasted like. The days were long, and the nights were longer. Every flicker of movement was a spy in the shadows. Every ally was a potential traitor. Every word was a declaration of war. Their home had become a target for 1,000 armies. Sorry, wait, let me quickly do something. Like this and this. There we go. Because I'm here. There we go. Through it all, his one constant was Filza, until he wasn't. Technoblade simply looked up one day from a map detailing enemy lines and realized he'd been talking to an empty air. He had no idea how long he'd been alone, sitting in a dusty library with stale tea untouched in the corner. He had no idea if Filzer ever said he was leaving, or if he simply went as he arrived suddenly, swiftly like a snowstorm. Afterwards, there was hardly any point in maintaining the empire. The voices were getting bored anyway. They wanted more, a fresh fight, more stories, so Techno took his sword and his shield and abandoned ship. He'd done it a million times before, but the thought of a chessboard lying unused in a crumbling castle made him feeling something close to regret. I want to find calmer music. Sorry, I'm nervous. Technoblade wandered the world, trying to appease the voices. Neither of them were ever satisfied. No matter how much chaos he dealt, there was always more work to be done. So he worked. He had no idea for how long. All he remembered from that bloody time was a sense of unfulfillment, like a story had been left unfinished halfway through. Years, decades, maybe more. It hardly mattered. In the end, he knew it would all be the same. The world would end and he would remain, always fighting, always alone. He didn't know what brought him to the kingdom in the first place. Did he really have to see it for himself? Was it simply to satiate the curiosity? Was he bored? Or did he hear from a kingdom untouched by the wars and petty grudges of its neighbors, keeping its peace and neutrality for a century, and make it a challenge? Whatever it is, when Technoblade stood under the shadow of a gilded castle, watching his flags flutter lazily in the summer breeze, he felt a flicker of a once familiar emotion stir his heart. There was something about the cobblestone walls and the towers rising towards the sky that reminded him of a different place, somewhere cold and far away. "Hello, stranger," one of the guards at the gates called out. "You sightseeing?" Technoblade paused, and the man's cheerful tone, Technoblade paused at the man's cheerful tone. Most of the guards that caught sight of Techno's sword and blood-red cape were quick to draw their weapons, but aside from spears that seemed more decorative than threatening, the guards at the gates didn't seem to be on guard at all. "Hubris," the voice said. This is a kingdom of hubris." "Perhaps," Techno drawled, indulging in the guard. "Although, I suppose I'm more curious about the inside rather than the outside." "Why didn't you say so?" the guard beckoned Techno forwards. "The castle is always open for tourists. Just come in." That was how Techno found himself walking leisurely down the halls of a castle that under normal circumstances he would have been storming blades drawn. The guards did draw the line at his weaponry, and made him discard his swords at the doors, as if Technoblade needed more than his hands, and sometimes not even those, to wreak havoc. The castle's laxness and security was disproportional to the opulence within. Lush carpet softened Techno's footsteps. Elegant tapestries decorated the walls. Flowers bloomed from vases as tall as him, and oil paintings in gilded frames. Paintings of solemn landscapes, of wild animals roaming cultivated garden, of a dark-haired boy astride a white horse. A hint of a smile in the corner of his mouth, and of the king. Technoblade stopped under the painting, nestled between vases of irises. Oh, he thought, that's why. It wasn't hubris making this kingdom think that they were protected from everything. It was their king. Rendered in paint and shadow, he looked just as Technoblade remembered, the years leaving no mark on his mortal face. He was standing behind a modest throne, his hand laid gently on the shoulder of a dark-haired woman that must be his queen. In the queen's arms was a golden-haired toddler sleeping peacefully. On the floor by his feet, his legs crossed under him, was another child, older, with a gold circle nested in his brown curls. Wilby! Wilby! A child's shrill voice rang down the hall. Technoblade's hand itched instinctively for his sword as he turned from the painting and found himself facing the very same boy from the painting. The prince. He was a tall, lean thing, his face still holding the faint traces of boyhood. He couldn't have been more than 14. In the painting, he'd been grinning, forever immortalized in delight. But here, he was staring, his dark eyes unnaturally focused, as if Techno was a particularly interesting book he was quietly picking apart in his head. Techno had seen that expression many times in the faces of wise generals looking over battlefield arrangements. Hello, the prince said cautiously. Technoblade found himself raising his hand in a small wave. Hello. Wilby, wait for me! The first voice called again, closer this time, and heralding the appearance of another child around the bend of the hallway. By his lavish attire and the small army of servants following fretfully after him. This could only be the younger prince, barely more than a babe in the painting, but now a rather loud 6-year-old. The younger prince marched purposefully towards his older brother, Wilby, and clung decidedly to his side as they both stared up at Techno. Sorry. And who are you? The small prince said, in what he must have intended to be a threatening tone. But he sounded more like he was really, but he sounded only like he really was a child. A visitor, said Techno, unsure of what he was meant to say now. Have you come to have an audience with our father? The older prince asked in a deceivably more level tone, sorry. Sorry. You can't, the younger prince snapped at once, tightening his hold on his older brother's shirt front. Dad promised today was our day with him, so you can just leave now, thank you. Tommy, calm yourself. But Wilbur, Dad said... I know what father said, Tommy. The older prince, Wilbur, then not Wilby. Gods know what Techno would have said and done if the man had truly named his son Wilby. Was still staring at Techno like a vulture waiting for a dying animal to drop. So, visitor, what is your business here? I have no business, Techno said. I am visiting, sightseeing, I'm a traveler. First you are a visitor, and now you are a traveler. A smile tugged at the prince's lips. This exchange would be much easier if we knew your name. Technoblade gazed at the servants, lining the hall behind the princes, clearly in earshot, but dutifully maintaining the illusion of privacy. But if he knew their father at all, he'd know that most of those standing guard around his son would be lethal killers. He just hadn't anticipated the arrival of a god. What would they do if they heard his name? Would any of them recognize it? Would they know what it meant to have him stand before their young princess? How long would they last against him? As he looked down at the two brothers, he found them small. He could crush them under the heel of his boot like ants. But instead, Techno found himself saying, "My name is Technoblade?" Techno lifted his eyes from the young princess and found himself staring at their father. "Filza?" Filza stood at the end of the hallway, undoubtedly following the familiar cadence of his son's voices. He glanced at them, now still standing before Technoblade, like unwitting sheep waiting for slaughter. But Filza's eyes showed no fear. Instead, when he looked back at Techno, he only smiled, his face softening with a familiar relief, the expression of a man after a long, hard-fought war, seeing peace on the horizon at last. Why is everyone saying Filza? I think it's okay. I think you're just reacting. Oh God, don't tell me he's here. Okay. Old friend, Filza said. "It's nice to see you again." "Traitor!" The voices clamored. "Traitor! Traitor! Traitor! Traitor!" "Father!" Wilbur's voice brought them back to reality. This was a different castle, a different time. "Do you know this stranger?" "Well, obviously, Wilbur." Tommy rolled his eyes. "Dad just said his name, didn't he? Technoblade. That's a dumb name." "Tommy," Filza reprimanded with never heard that word, with no real heat behind his words. He drew closer to them, his steps quiet and even. The servants that had followed the two boys bowed in defense of their liege, despite him wearing no crown. In fact, he looked just as much as a traveler as Techno was, dressed in a simple trousers and a shirt, perfect for blending in, perfect for a man on the run. "It's been a long time," Filza said when he reached them, putting a gentle hand on the top of Tommy's blonde head. The boy arced towards the touch like a sunflower reaching towards the sun. Technoblade didn't know if the move was calculated, or a simple act of affection, or, knowing Filza, both. "How have you been?" "How have I been?" Techno repeated humbly. Oh, that's not humbly. "How have I been?" "How have I been?" Techno repeated, numbly, feeling a familiar chill creep into his bones. "Phil, Actually," Phil interrupted, before kneeling to his boys in the eyes. "Wilbur, take your brother out to the garden for a bit, yeah?" Wilbur pouted, for once looking like a boy his age. "But you said—" "I know what I promised, and I keep my promises, don't I?" Filza ruffled Wilbur's hair, and then Tommy's. "I'll join you in a moment. I just need to have a talk with Technoblade here." Wilbur stared at his father for a long moment, as if weighing the truth of his words before nodding. He took his brother's hand and began leading him away. "Come on, Tommy," he said. "Let's play outside." I want to make voices, but I feel like I would be very bad at making voices. I hope that's okay. Okay. Technoblade's still a dumb name, Tommy muttered as they passed him, closely followed by his servants. Wilbur met Technoblade's eyes just for a moment before they were gone, down the hall, out of sight, leaving Technoblade alone with the king. Technoblade turned towards Filza, his old friend, and found the smile wiped clean from his face. It's getting intense. Filza gestured down the hall. "Walk with me?" Technoblade could only nod and follow Filza. They were quiet as they walked. Techno remembered days like these during the time together, as days of companionable silence, as they were simply existing together. But there was something different this time. There was an edge. Techno could only sense Filza sizing him up, tallying his hidden weapons, calculating his improvements. In turn, Techno mapped his escape routes as Filza led him through the halls, then up a sweeping flight of stairs. He did not want to expect violence from Filza, but he hadn't expected to be left behind either. They reached a balcony overlooking a garden where most of the flowers indoors undoubtedly came from. Wisteria and ivy grew around marble pillars, rose bushes and dandelions and carnations bloomed in mass on the foot of elaborate stone statues. At the center of the garden was a weeping willow, its branches providing shade for the two boys chasing each other across the grass. Their laughter echoed to the glade, reaching even Techno and their father high up on the balcony. For a while, the two of them just watched the two princes. Wilbur was obviously faster than Tommy, but he slowed his pace just enough for his little brother to have fun chasing his heels. They're a handful. Phil's soft tone turned Techno's attention away from the princes. The king was almost smiling, but the hard glint in his eyes didn't disappear. Wilbur was quieter before Tommy was born. A little bookworm, holed up in his room all day, but I have a feeling you didn't drop by for silly stories like that. Filza turned towards Techno. So, go ahead. Let me have it. Techno didn't know what he was meant to feel. He didn't know what he was meant to say. For years he'd put Filzer out of his mind, determined to forget that interlude of peace. He'd let the memories fester like untreated wounds. And now he thought he'd rather die of the infection than acknowledge out loud that it was real, that the pain was there at all. I didn't mean to drop by, Techno said eventually. I didn't know this place was yours. I can leave if you... No, Filza shook his head. Don't leave. Truth be told, this reunion was inevitable. This reunion was inevitable, or I hoped it was. Inevitable. Yes. Sorry. How long have you been here? Filza considered. How long has this kingdom been standing? Phil, that's... I know. People like us aren't... Wait, was it? Inevitable. Okay, it was inevitable, guys. The meeting was inevitable. I know. People like us aren't meant to stay in one place for too long. Filza sighed and turned back towards the horizon. He leaned his arms against the rocked iron railings and looked out the land beyond, the slope of the distant mountains, the kingdom that stretched on and on, unaware that their immortal king was all that stood between them and destruction. I found a small town while I was traveling, made it something more. I told myself I would leave after a year, and then it became 2 years and 3 years, a decade. I did leave eventually, before they figured out why their town mayor never aged. But then I found out the moment I left. Filza's expression turned cold. They were annihilated. I came back and everyone had been burned to the ground. It was just ashes. Everything I built, there were survivors, of course, and they blamed their leader for leaving, of course, as they should. So I stayed. I built it back up again, from a small, decimated town to what you see today. As far as the people know, leadership had been passed on from one king to another, who looks vaguely like him. I'm sure the eldest of them have their rumors, but is it really so bad to be known? Technoblade didn't realize until Phil turned back to look at him that he expected an answer to his question, but all Technoblade could say was, "Is this why you left me behind?" Techno, I understand. You heard the place you loved was in trouble, so you came back, but why didn't you take me? There it was at last, catharsis, or something close to it. I would have turned them down with you, Filza. The people who did that to your town, I would have given you your vengeance on a silver platter. I would have given you the world. Filza didn't look guilty. He just looked tired. I didn't hunt them down, though. What? The people who burned down my town, I didn't hunt them down. As much as I wanted to, they were long gone by the time I arrived. And at that moment, my people needed a leader, not a hunter. And I didn't bring you because I don't know when to be either. They stood there, letting the words settle in silence that stretched taut and tauter like a rope around Technoblade's neck. Deny it. He wanted to shout. Tell me I'm wrong. Filza did not. I don't need to hear this from you, Technoblade spat. A well of old hurt and anger, once dried up, began to fill anew. Okay. Thank you, outside. Anyway, I don't need to hear this from you, Technoblade splat. A well of old hurt and anger, once dried up, began to fill anew. So your sons even know you're here? Who are you? The angel of death, domesticated with a farce? Filza sniffed. Stiffened. Didn't sniff, he stiffened. You know not of which you speak. I once saw you tear a man apart with your bare hands. Thank you so much for the sub. Wait, let me move that real quick. Thank you so much for the sub. Ghosty leaving. I appreciate it. Thank you. I once saw you tear a man apart with your bare hands, and now you're telling me about leadership, about kindness? I said nothing about kindness. I had completely renounced my ways. My kingdom would not be what it is today. Domesticated dogs still bite. Filza stepped towards him until they were eye to eye. Despite the accusations Techno hurled at him, despite their bloody history, Techno had never truly seen Filza angry, but he had a feeling that if he kept running down this road, head fist, he might... Oh my god. I need to make this quieter. Oh my god, Herper Sheep, thank you for the gifted sub. I need to make this quieter. Oh my god. Okay. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Kept running down his head fist. He might find himself knowing the full extent of his old friend's wrath. Filza's eyes were hard as flint, one spark away from combustion. Technoblade glazed down the garden. Phil followed his gaze until they were both staring back at the boys below, who'd ceased their playing to wonder at their father and the stranger. They couldn't have heard a thing of what Filza or Techno said, but Wilbur stood with his head knocked inquisitively to the side, as if he were turning over the words. Dad, Tommy shouted, are you almost finished? Almost, Filza called back. I'll be there right down, kids. I'll be right down, kids. Thank you for the gifted sub, Confused Alex. I appreciate it. Thank you. Tommy elbowed Wilbur and said something that made the other boy throw his head back in laughter. Then the two of them took off, back to their games. Thank you for the gifted sub, Ecolash. And Callie, thank you for the gifted sub. Where are we? When Technoblade turned to Phil again, the king's expression had turned considerably softer. Techno could live another 1,000 years and still never understand how easily Filza could hide his fury. There we go. Are we having a sub break? Are we having a sub break, everyone? A break where people sub? If you want to sub, we're on chapter 1, yeah. Oh, should I put it in the title? Yeah, we're gonna take oh, look, it's me, hi. We're gonna take a short break, chapter 1. Chapter 1. Chapter 1, there we go. In case you want to sub. There's not gonna be any subs now. Oh, chat, I am nervous. I feel like I'm getting better. I get thrown off here and there by reading, but I feel like it's okay. I'm good. We're good. I'm fine. I got it in my nose. I got it in my nose. thank you for the subs. Thank you for the sub. Oh wait, let me quickly. Quickly move this. Sunspread, thank you for the sub. Laura, thank you for the sub. Himsa, thank you for the sub. I really appreciate it. All right, we're gonna continue now. Sorry, that was that was me dying real quick. Cringe Waffles, thank you for the sub. I appreciate it. All right. I'm gonna read out. I'm just gonna look. You can still sub, but I'm just gonna not read them out right now. I'll read them out later, if that's okay. Okay. Tommy about Wilbur. Blah blah. Hide his fury. Okay. I wasn't trying to settle down, Filza said quietly now, as if he was imploring a child to stop a tantrum. His eyes were still on his sons below. I was content for a while to watch the kingdom grow. But these mortals and their short, fitful lives, they draw you in, Technoblade. I used to think they were moths drawn to flame. They were moths drawn to flame, doomed to catch fire for the most inconsequential things. We've seen their wars. You and I, we fought them. We both know the things they do to each other. Filza took hold of the balcony railings, as if it was the only thing keeping him from floating away. But over the years, I've also learned of the things they do for each other. Their lives will always be 1 year, 1 week, 1 day short, but it doesn't seem to matter much to them. They live anyway. They love anyway. Forgive an old god for wanting a piece of that for himself. A late morning breeze passed through, carrying with the scent of flowers and the shredded remains of Techno's anguish. The fury was still there, and the feeling of betrayal, so grand it might never be bridged. But the exhaustion had begun to settle in. Techno was used to quick brawls and long hunts, but verbal altercation was not something he'd ever trained for, mostly because he had not cared to speak to anyone that mattered since forever, perhaps. And maybe Filza had been tired too, of the life before, always fighting, never safe, and although Techno thought it was only a matter of time before his game of peace was over, he thought maybe he could start to understand why Phil took the chance. It was a foolish move, and Technoblade would scoff at it for the rest of their immortal lives, but it would not be the worst choice anyone ever had made. Technoblade had seen the worst, and this was barely a drop of the ocean, in the ocean of bad decisions. Still, it was stupid. One look at Filza and Technoblade realized he must know it too. Are they like you? Techno asked at last, unsure what answer he was waiting for. Your boys? Filza sighed. I would not wish my fate on my worst enemy, at least of all my own children. His hands tightened around the railings. They take after their mother. Mortal. Good in all ways. I thank every god that has ever existed for that. I thank every god. But sometimes? Techno prompted when the silence stretched too long. Filza's jaws clenched. It's Wilbur. He speaks of voices. Voices? Filza met Techno's eyes. A conversation from lifetimes ago, replayed in Techno's mind. A moment of vulnerability in a castle not so different from this one, where he had spilled his secret as easily as he has spilled blood. The voices, Phil. They demand blood. There was a world's worth of agony in Filza's stare, a burden only understood by a parent fearing for a child. I'm glad he is not like me, Filza said, but sometimes I fear he is growing more and more like you. Techno's breath hitched in his throat. He resisted the urge to look down again, to search his grasp for the boy with the ancient eyes. The voices began to sing. Not alone, they said. Not alone, not alone, not alone. No, Techno said, curling his hands into fists and digging his nail into flesh until it drew blood, his daily penance. He is but a child. Techno paused. What was he talking about? What did it matter what Wilbur was? That was a sudden... ache in his, what was the sudden ache in his chest? Something telling of a far deeper wound, an older affliction. He did not know this boy. He should not care. He did not care. But then Filza seized by him the wrist, as if he knew Techno was about to take off running, and forced him to meet his tongued gaze. This is why I'd hoped you would come. Truth be told, I was never close to looking for myself. I cannot do this by myself, Technoblade. As much as I want to, you're the only one. You want my help, Techno said dully. My help? After you abandoned me? After you denounced my ways and called me a monster? Filza flinched. I would never call you that, my friend. Friend. The world that Technoblade had only truly understood in the days of snow and sweet tea. I don't owe you anything, Techno said quietly. I don't owe that child anything. I know. And I have better things to do with my life, I know. After all you did, I shouldn't be listening to you right now. I should just leave. I know, Techno, I know. And then Filza did something Technoblade would never, in 100 or 1,000,000 years, have expected him to do. He kneeled. Filza, once emperor, presently king, this is too quick again, sorry. Presently king, angel of death, kneeled before Technoblade, grasping pathetically at his cloak. His golden hair bowed. The voices were a chorus of a disgust and disdain. Oh, how he might have fallen. And when Filza spoke again, his voice wavered. I'm sorry, truly, for leaving, but I am asking you, begging you to do this for me, for my son, for the friendship that we once shared, Techno. Please, please. I don't know how much time the gods will give us. What will you have me do? Techno demanded, his own voice fraying at the edges. What do you expect from me, Phil? Filza looked up at him, his face sturdy in agony. Stay and help as much as you can, and together maybe we can help you as well. The voices paused, just for a moment, just for a breath, as they all considered the weight of Filza's words. And, gods, that silence, however brief, however fleeting, was the sweetest thing Technoblade had ever heard. We can help you. What did that mean exactly? What would that entail? Technoblade didn't know and didn't care. He'd come here in search for a kingdom of peace, and he found it. Forgive an old god for wanting a piece of that himself, Filza had said. And what was peace if not the silence? What was not freedom was that not freedom at last? So as the voices began to chant anew, an immortal hunter offered an immortal king his hand. The sun climbed higher towards the heart of the sky as Technoblade pulled Filza to his feet, and they were on equal ground once more. He had no idea what he was doing, but there was no true alternative. So Technoblade met his old friend's gaze and said, "All right, you and me, one more time." Damn! Shall we read another one? Shall we read another chapter? Shall we read another chapter? We can read another chapter. Now I'm into it. Do we read the summary? I guess so, yeah. Whew. Damn. I like it though. It's really fun. It's really cool. Alright, let's read the second chapter. Wait, I'm gonna drink water. I'm gonna drink water first. Wait, what? I think you're in the next one. Wait, wait, chapter 2, right? Yeah, okay. yeah, I need to change the title. Okay, let's change the title to Chapter 2. Okay, let's find some better music, because this one is very... Ooh, I like this one. Oh yeah, the subs. Thank you so much, A-Bat for the sub. Thank you, Echo Savannah, for the sub. Cringe Waffles, thank you so much for the sub. Maury, thank you for the sub. And Painted Dynasty, thank you so much for the sub. I really appreciate it. Alright, Chapter 2. A Carillon of Bells. Summary. You look at him like you look at me, and I don't know what to make of it. Father's gaze pinned Wilbur to his seat, even more than the soreness of his body did. Even Tommy had fallen quiet, sensing in the way that younger siblings do, that his brother was in the sort of trouble that required absolute silence. "And how do I look at you, Will?" Father asked. "Oh, flowers. Or flowers, family, and the futility of trying to outrun fate." Okay. Oh, we have some trigger warnings here. Trigger warnings, panic attacks, and death. Just so you know. Okay. Wilbur. Sorry. It's because I keep spelling his name wrong on purpose. Oh, anyway. Wilbur. Wilbur did not know what to make of the visitor, the traveler, whatever he was. Father had come down the garden with him, and Wilbur could tell he was sad. He didn't know if the visitor had been the cause or something. Had been the cause or something else. Someone else. A formal introduction is in order, Father had told Wilbur and Tommy, and this is Technoblade, an old friend. He'll be tutoring you for a while, Wilbur. Wilbur had started up. Okay. Wilbur had stared up at the same man, seeing him in the soft morning light at last. Technoblade. Tommy was right. It was a pretty dumb name, and one Wilbur had heard before, though he wasn't sure where. He was tall and lean, most likely a few years older than Wilbur. He was dressed like him, too, with poofy sleeves that Tommy always had said had made him look like an old man. An emerald earring hung from Technoblade's left ear, similar to the one that Father wore on a golden chain around his neck, tucked secretively under his dress shirt. Was he some sort of royalty too, then? Some foreign prince or a distant cousin that Father never bothered to tell Wilbur about? It's so hard not to say Will. Father kept many secrets. This may just be one of a million. Technoblade had taken one look at Wilbur, nodded, and then said, We'll start at dawn. We'll start at dawn before leaving them. Come on, Niki, calm down. Wilbur had stared after him, perplexed. What? Father had struggled to keep a smile off his face. That's techno for you. Now they were sitting in the dining hall, each of their own thoughts, except Tommy, whose thoughts must always come out of his mouth, regardless of who was or wasn't listening. And Wilbur tripped me, but I got up very quickly, and you saw that didn't you, Dad? Dad, didn't you? I saw, Father said, distractedly. He was staring down at his half-eaten plate, as if it held the secrets of the universe. Wilbur assumed he was only going only doing it so he wouldn't be staring at Mother's empty seat. He'd been taking more and more of her meals in her bedroom. Tommy hadn't noticed yet, but Wilbur did. Wilbur always did. And this techno fellow, he's a bit of an odd one, isn't he? Will he be training me too? Will I have to wake up at dawn like Wilbur? Wilbur grimaced. Please don't remind me, Tommy. The music, I know, I'm sorry, it's just a playlist. Tommy stuck his tongue out at him from across the table. It's not like you have any other plans. I'm sure you'll just be staying up reading again. He gestured dramatically to himself. I, for one, would love to be under the tutelage of Minister Technoblade, stupid as his name may be. The two of them turned to their father, one with starry-eyed expression, the other one with morbid curiosity. Father sighed fondly before ruffling Tommy's hair. Sorry, little bad. Maybe we can find someone else for you. I'm sure the captain would be willing to. But I want the blade, Tommy whined. Wilbur snorted. Yeah, as if you could ever even wake up early enough. You'll still be in bed at noon. I can see it by now. Father gave Wilbur a cheeky grin, the only reserved for his eldest son. Tell you what, Tommy, if you can wake up with Wilbur, then you can watch him train with Techno. Truly? Tommy kicked back from the table, nearly upsetting Father's glass of wine. Good night then. Early to bed, early to the prize, as they always say. Who says that? Wilbur said, but Tommy had already gone off, leaving Wilbur with their father and the silence. For a while, the only sound were utensils scrapping against plates and Wilbur's heartbeat in his ears. He would never admit it to Tommy or anyone, but his relationship with Father was always better with his brother around. It wasn't that Wilbur didn't love his father, or that he thought his father didn't love him. Wilbur couldn't remember it happening, but somewhere along the way of studying warfare and politics... Wait, let me make the music a little bit quieter. And studying politics, of starring up at the throne and what would one day be his, of learning how to be a prince, he'd forgotten how to be a son. And sometimes, when Father thought he couldn't see, Father would look at him with bottomless grief, like he was mourning something already lost. It should be Tommy, Wilbur had thought. Sunny Tommy, who managed to charm everyone he met, in spite of, or perhaps because of, his loud disposition. Not him. Not when Father looked at him like that. Wilbur swallowed the last of his dinner and was set to go, if not for his father speaking once more. Wilbur? Yes, Father? Father leaned against his hands, and as he considered Wilbur, do you want me to be there for you tomorrow? Wilbur scoffed, half-heartedly. I'm not a child, Father. Of course, Father said, but Technoblade is still a stranger to you. Wilbur pursed his lips and he thought about his father's words. Do you trust him? Yes, Father replied at once. Wilbur nodded. Then I trust him. Father stared at him for a long minute and then nodded. There was nothing else to say, it seemed, and so Wilbur left, leaving his father to the quiet. Okay. My lip is hurting. Give me 1 second. It's all good. It's just, okay. Tommy's door was firmly shut by the time Wilbur arrived at their sleeping quarters. Wilbur's own door stood ajar, waiting. Moonlight spilled from the arched windows, painting everything in silver. The bed littered with half-finished books, and the desk bearing scars from Wilbur's manifold frustrations in writing music for the guitar that sat discarded on the floor. Mother had given him that guitar for his 10th birthday. He used to play lullabies or spooky songs when he was in the mood for older brother mischief for Tommy, before Tommy decided he was a big man and moved out the bedroom across the wall. Is it not my fault? No, it is my fault. Okay. Okay. His body felt heavy with thoughts. Technoblade, the boy who looked not much older than him, now tasked at tutoring him. At what? Father had not been forthcoming with that, amongst other things. With a sigh, Wilbur grabbed the guitar from the floor and dragged it with him to the window. As he plucked idly at the strings, he gazed out the horizon beyond the glass, the sprawling lawns of the castle ending at the foreboding gates, and then after that, his kingdom, his birthright. His birthright! Sorry. Oh, manifold is a word that means various. Okay. Anyway. He played a single discordant chord. Nothing had come easily to him recently. Music, literature, conversation, everything. All at once had come taxing. Even laughing with his brother felt like a chore. Wilbur's fingers stilled on what had undoubtedly going to be another bad note. Something was moving down in the law. He squinted at the figure until it came into sharper focus. Technoblade? Wilbur pressed his face closer to the glass, just to make sure his eyes had not deceived him. There were many people in the kingdom with pink hair, but perhaps fewer who also moved with the lethal grace of a python. Technoblade walked across the lawn and disappeared past the gates without a glaze back. It wasn't until his breath frogged up in the window completely that Wilbur realized he was hyperventilating. He pulled away from the glass and stumbled over his guitar. On his way to his bed, he pulled the covers over himself as if the darkness would dampen his thoughts. Where is he going? Followed by the, will he come back? Will he come back? Will he come back? Will he... You're late. Wilbur blinked in the dim sunlight, barely breaking through the horizon. What? He blinked some more until he finally recognized his surroundings. The smooth marble floor, the 4 columns sculpted like gods bearing up the flat roof, ivy following over the roof's edge like a waterfall, curating them off from the rest of the garden. This was the training pavilion, Father's personal training area, where he attempted to teach Wilbur fencing before it became clear that weaponry was not to be Wilbur's forte. It's all right, son, Father had said, carefully tending to the cut on Wilbur's leg from his own rapier. Kings don't really need to know how to fight. That's what armies are for. Father had sounded angry as he said this, but Wilbur somehow knew it wasn't because of him. But you know, Wilbur had pouted, dutifully trying to hold back tears. Father applied, sitting herbs to his wound. Well, Father said, oh, but you know how. That's different. Different how? Just different, Father finished, tying the badges around Wilbur's leg, and smiled at him. I'll tell you when you're older. He never had. But it wasn't Father standing before Wilbur today. Well, Technoblade said, gesturing to the heavy chest in the corner. We're burning daylight here, little prince. Hurry up. Wilbur blinked again. Sorry, how did I... Technoblade stared at him quietly as they both waited for Wilbur to finish his sentence. His eyes are red, Wilbur noted distantly, even as he struggled to remember anything else. He could not recall falling asleep, or waking up, or walking down to meet his new tutor for the first lesson. Well, Technoblade prodded. Wilbur shook his head. Nothing. What are we, learning today? Technoblade cocked his head to the side, unimpressed. His hair had been pulled into a braid, so tight that it hurt Wilbur's scalp by proxy. Filza said you were crap at fencing. Wilbur grimaced as he walked over the chest, kneeling to filter through his contents. That's one way of saying it. He picked up one of the swords and turned to Technoblade, who had apparently bought his own weapon, a wicked-looking broadsword with ruby encrusted hilt. I'm a bit better at long-ranged weapons, if you were wondering. I wasn't, Technoblade snorted. Get into position. Whoa, Wilbur did. That's not correct, Wilbur sighed. I told you. Technoblade walked closer to Wilbur until they were eye to eye. Wilbur was a few inches taller than him, he realized, at least until Technoblade knocked him flat on his back. With a sudden blow to the stomach, the air left Wilbur's lungs in a rush. He blinked lazily up the ceiling for a moment before the integration set in. Oh, is chat spoiling? Don't spoil chat. He leaned himself against his elbow and glared at his elbows and glared at his tutors, who was looking more and more unimpressed. You could have withstood what you would have. Wait, my monitor is turning off right now. How do I turn up? 1 second. 1 second, chat. 1 second, chat. Okay, wait, so you can still see me. I can't see my Streamlabs. I can't open my Streamlabs. One second. 1 second. 1 second. Oh god, this is awkward. Okay. Okay, we're back. Everything's good. We're back. Oh my god. My monitor just turned off. Anyway. The music. Yeah, the music is really fitting here. Let's turn on, so let's listen to this. Okay. Where are we? I told you. Technoblade walked closer to Wilbur until they were eye to eye. Wilbur was a few inches taller. Oh, we already got that. He leaned himself against his elbows and glared at his tutor, who was looking more and more unimpressed. You could have withstood if you were in the correct position, Technoblade drawled. You could have warned me, Wilbur spat, clambering to his feet. Oh, is that how a fight goes, Your Highness? Technoblade mocked. All right then. If it pleases you, your princeliness, I shall be striking your shoulder with the flat of my blade next. What? Quicker than breath, Technoblade did just that. Wilbur landed on his side, his own weapon flying out of his hand. Technoblade laughed with no real warmth. I even warned you this time, and I still knocked you over. Gods, you're pathetic. Wilbur wanted to say, I'm calling my father, but caught himself before he could give that ammunition to the smug bastard. Instead, he shakingly to his feet, his entire body smarting from the impact of the floor, and picked his rapier up the ground. He got into position again. Technoblade raised one elbow. This would go faster if you told me what's wrong with it, Wilbur grumbled. This would go even faster if you didn't fumble your basics, Technoblade retorted. Shut up. Strong demands from a boy who can't even get his left foot placed properly. Wilbur considered his words. He moved his left foot inch by inch, watching Technoblade until the man finally gave a curl nod. Wilbur sighed. See? That wasn't... Oh my gods! Wilbur barely had time to throw up his rapier before Technoblade crashed his sword against it. Steel hissed. Wilbur's knees buckled under Technoblade's surprising strength. It felt like having an entire house collapse on him, and if he fell, he'd be crushed. Technoblade fell back, leaving Wilbur with his heart hammering in his chest. What was that? Wilbur demanded. You could have killed me with that. You could have killed me that time. I could have killed you multiple times since you first walked in here. Technoblade gestured from him to get into position. Again. Never let your guard down, Your Highness. Always assume the enemy is planning to strike. What even is the point of this? Wilbur asked. The kingdom has been at peace for gods know how long. I don't need to risk my neck for a skill that doesn't even matter. Technoblade considered him for a long moment, the silence between them only broken by the beginnings of bird songs as the rest of the world finally began to wake. And what will you do when it does matter? Technoblade asked. It never will, but let's say it will. Technoblade interrupted, taking a step towards Wilbur, his red eyes never once leaving the prince's face. Let's say, hypothetically, that a foreign army attacks. At this very moment, your father isn't there to help. Nobody's here to help. It's just you. Do you just stand there and get torn apart by the mob? When you run like a coward and leave your kingdom to the wolves? Wilbur flinched. That's not... or not even an army. Consider, if you will, just one very smart, very angry person, and they've got your brother. Technoblade smirked at whatever expression was on Wilbur's face. That's all it takes, you know, to kill a kingdom. A single person who knows your weak spots. So what you need to do is get rid of them. The weak spots, I mean. The kingdom is only impenetrable because Filza has long ago gotten rid of every vulnerability. So what happens when you take the throne? That's not true, Wilbur said quietly, standing in the downpour of Technoblade's words. My father, he does have vulnerabilities. He has mother, Tommy, me. But he has the power to protect them, Technoblade replied, and you don't. That's the difference. The sun had climbed higher to the sky, painting everything in gold. Through the gaps in the ivy, the warm light shone on Wilbur's skin, warming him from the inside out. He imagined the light seeping into his skin, into his bones, into the cracks of his soul, until he could be made whole again, a boy of sunlight, like Tommy. He wanted the sun to burn away the tiredness, the sadness, the thoughts. He wanted the sun to burn Technoblade too, with his harsh words made harsher by the truth. Wilbur took a shaky breath, letting the fresh air and the trapping in his lungs letting the fresh air in and trapping it in his lungs for as long as he could. Then he let it out. He glared at Technoblade, then got into position. Fine, he spat. Do your worst. Wilbur, you look like trash, Tommy said brightly over a plate of eggs. Oh, that's after, yeah. Tommy, father scolded. No, Technoblade mumbled through a mouth of meat. The boy's right, Phil. Wilbur does look like trash. Wilbur groaned at their remarks, and then groaned some more when the movement made his ribs feel like they were cracking apart. Bruises were already starting to form up and down his arms from the various times Technoblade had knocked him to the floor. He couldn't even reach for his utensils without pain lacing up his side, and his breakfast reminded tantalizingly out of reach, right in front of him. Titty Pang! Oh my god, it's Titty Pang, guys! It's Titty Pang! Oh my god, Techno gave Wilbur a Titty Pang? My god. We all knew. Sorry. Tommy's initial annoyance at sleeping in and missing the blade in action was only matched by his absolute delight of seeing his older brother so battered, and then exceeded by his excitement when father invited Technoblade for breakfast to re-encounter how terribly Wilbur had performed. It was to track his progress, or some sort of excuse like that, though Wilbur guessed father just wanted to stop Technoblade from disappearing, whenever he goes off like last night. It's canon, it is canon. Did he cry? Tommy demanded, practically vibrating off his chair. Technoblade, seated next to him, cut another piece of meat and chewed ponderously on it before answering. Almost. Wicked, Tommy breathed. Father glanced at Wilbur worriedly, taking in his bruises. Techno, maybe next time you can go easy a bit. No, Wilbur said hurriedly, wincing when his sore limbs protested. No, I told him not to hold back. Father raised his elbow. I doubt that. No, really, I need this, father, Wilbur insisted. His legs felt like lead, and some of his bones were definitely misplaced. But by the end of the 5-hour session, he had learned where to strike, to kill, and where to strike to incapacitate, how to block attacks as much as deal them and how to fight off stronger opponents, which for you would be all of them, Techno had said as he rightened Wilbur's grip on the rapier. God. Let the boy bruise a little bit, Phil, Techno said now, downing a glass of wine. It's good practice, good distraction too. Distraction? Wilbur looked at his father, but he was busy trying to force a bowl of vegetables on Tommy. When he looked again, Wilbur found himself meeting eyes with Technoblade. Why not breakfast? Different times, chat. Different times. What can I say? They definitely had wine at breakfast during like the Middle Ages. Okay. The other boy was considering him at length. Wilbur had caught sight of that expression multiple times at the past 5 hours, like Technoblade was inspecting him. Less with the scrutiny of a teacher and more with the intense focus of a surgeon trying to not make the wrong cut. What? Wilbur finally asked. Do I have something on my face? Yes. Defeat. Wilbur resisted the urge. Damn, Technoblade's savage. Wilbur resisted the urge to stick his tongue out like Tommy undoubtedly would have done. You're a very rude guest, and you are a very weak prince. I don't see what my physical powers or lack of thereof, Wilbur Technoblade inserted, has to do with you being such a pissy bastard. Wilbur finished hotly. Wilbur, father said, sweeping the face of his oldest son. Cursing in front of your baby brother? I taught you better manners than that. I'm not a baby, Tommy protested. And what does piss... I think that's my cue to go, Technoblade interrupted suddenly, rising from his seat. To where? Father asked. None of your business, actually, Technoblade replied, not flippantly or arrogantly, just starting a fact. Father's grip tightened, infinitens. What the hell is this word? Father's grip tightened infinitesimally on his spoon. I'm sorry. Okay, it tightened on a spoon. I think it is my business if you're leaving in my castle. Technoblade shrugged. Try and stop me then. It means a small bit. Oh, okay. So it's like it's tightening a bit. Okay. They stared each other down. The king and his visitor, red eyes on blue. A moment passed, then another. Father did not move. That's what I thought, Technoblade scoffed, and then disappeared in a swirl of fur and scarlet silk. Wilbur gazed at Father, trying to gauge his reaction. Father had never seemed truly old, but in that moment, it felt like Wilbur was watching him age 1,000 years per second. Who is he really? Wilbur asked, before he could lose the nerve. Father blinked slowly, as if coming out of a dream. An old friend, I told you. From when? He can't be that old of a friend. He's just a teenager. When did you meet him? Wilbur repeated. Father pursed and unpursed his lips, like he was trying to swallow something rancid. Why does it matter, Wilbur? Because you look at him like you look at me, and I don't know what to make of that. Father's gaze pinned Wilbur to his seat, even more than the soreness of his body did. Even Tommy had fallen quiet, sensing in the way that younger siblings do, that his brother was in the sort of trouble that required absolute silence. And how do I look at you, Will? Father asked. Like I disappoint you, like I did something to hurt you, and you're sad and I can't remember what. It doesn't matter, Wilbur mustered. Mustered what was left in his strength and rose from his seat. My other non-violent tutors are waiting. If you will excuse me, Father, Tommy. Tommy stared back at him, wide-eyed. Father only sighed. It's a long story, Wilbur, he said with infinite patience. Wilbur would have preferred he screamed. And not one you're ready to hear, either of you, he added, giving Tommy a reassuring smile. But one day I'll... Sure. Wilbur turned from them and began to walk away. One day, whenever that is. He expected a rebuttal, or perhaps wanted one, but as always, there was nothing left to say. They carried on like that for months more. Every morning, Wilbur would pull himself out of the bed and head down to the gardens, where Technoblade would always be waiting, even after the times he threatened to leave and the times that it looked like he was truly going to. Technoblade would walk Wilbur through his stances and correct them by demonstrating how exactly it could be turned against him. The tutor was never fully pleased, but eventually they made way through the weapons in the chest and had to request for more to practice with, spares and knives and axes. They never spoke beyond the usual instructions, and Wilbur never complained again when a few weeks in he almost did. Almost disarmed Technoblade during a sparring session with their rapier, before Technoblade invertibly knocked him over again. Almost got you, Wilbur had grinned. Even he picked himself up from the floor. Almost won't cut it in the battlefield, princeling, Technoblade had said with the roll of his eyes, and I was going easy on you. Whatever helps you sleep at night? Technoblade snorted. I don't sleep. Wilbur still debating whether he'd been joking or not. Eventually, Tommy's jealousy overweighed his drowsiness, and he'd begun to follow Wilbur to the training pavilion, yawning all the way, with his blanket wrapped around his shoulders and trailing in the dewy grass. He'd sit on the floor, shouting unhelpful advice and laughing at his brother's failures. Technoblade, the younger prince had said at one point, will you train me alongside Wilbur? Technoblade had eyed Tommy and his blanket, looking so serious that Wilbur thought he might actually be sizing this little brother up. Well, do you have similar skill levels? Hey! Wilbur tossed. Oh, well, you do have similar skill levels. Hey! Wilbur tossed a stray pebble at Technoblade's head. It bounced harmlessly off his braided hair. I want to be strong like you, Tommy said, uncharacteristically solemn as he stared up at the older boys. And like Dad, he raised his grandly arms up to them. Look at these, Technoblade. They're pulsing with potential. Technoblade arched an elbow at him, an amused smile tugging at his lips. Little prince, you are years away from needing to learn anything. Your brother's training, so you don't have to. Understood? Tommy pouted, but nodded. Wilbur stared at him, feeling as if he'd just witnessed the taming of a wild beast. He glanced at Technoblade, who had walked over to one corner of the pavilion to stretch. How do you get Tommy not to kick and scream like he does when he doesn't get what he wants from me? Wilbur called out. Don't kick and scream. I don't kick and scream, Tommy huffled. I let out a manly whine. It's probably because he respects me and not you, Technoblade replied curtly. Cartly, yeah. Wilbur wiled on his brother. Is that true? He demanded with fox hurt. Tommy shrugged. I'd respect you more if you weren't reading all the time. Let's change the music, sorry. If you were not reading all the time. I'm not reading now, Wilbur said, at the same time Technoblade called. I know how to read too, just to put it out there. Manly wine, yeah. Afterwards, they would eat breakfast together. Sometimes it would just be Wilbur, Technoblade, and Tommy going over the practice session. Technoblade with his dry corrections and Tommy with his enthusiastic, albeit often inaccurate input. But often Father would join them, and Wilbur would be lying if he said he didn't feel a bit validated whenever Technoblade praised, or as close as the man could get to praise, his improvements in front of his father. Mother had taken to walking late and took her breakfast in the room. They visit her there, Wilbur and Tommy, but she'd often be too tired to speak at all. Tommy tried to introduce Technoblade to her once, but she was already asleep, again by the time they arrived at the bedchambers. Probably for the best, Technoblade said. I've been told I don't make great first impressions with mothers, mostly because I met them after I just slaughtered their children. Please reserve the morbid jokes after Tommy's gone to bed, Technoblade, Wilbur said. What does slaughtered mean? Tommy asked. I tickled them, Technoblade said. Oh, to death. Oh. Wilbur had hit Technoblade on the shoulder, but he was laughing too. 3 months in, Technoblade finally relented to letting Wilbur practice long-ranged weapons, which turned out not to be his forte after all. The session had to stop after Wilbur almost took Tommy's eyes out with an arrow. Tommy was inconsolable. Please don't tell father, Wilbur backed as he kneeled in front of his wailing brother, wimping Tommy's cheeks as fast as the tears came. It was an accident, Tommy. Technoblade was crackling, leaning against one of the pavillon's sculpted pillars. You should see your face, he managed to wheeze out between his guafs. Oh gods, this is too hilarious. Wilbur turned to glare at him. You do know if he tells father it means you're in trouble too, Technoblade snorted. I'm not scared of your father. There was again the arrogant dismissal, as if father were nothing to him. Wilbur clenched his jaw to keep the barbed remarks from spilling. Tommy was still wailing, his tiny face turning red from the effort. Okay, Technoblade said after a long moment. That's getting annoying now. Stop. Tommy didn't. Tommy, stop, Technoblade said more loudly. Tommy stopped, only to wipe his nose from his sleeve, hiccup, and then wail again. What's wrong with him? That usually works, Technoblade grumbled, stalking closer to them with the caution of a hunter approaching a wild animal. Welcome to the world of Big Brotherhood, Wilbur replied bitterly, still wiping gently at Tommy's face. We hope you enjoy your stay, but most likely you will suffer. Technoblade came to kneel beside Wilbur. Tommy, Technoblade demanded. This is very irritating. What you're doing? Please quiet down. Tommy responded by crying louder. Oh, for the love of, what will it take for you to shut up? I'll do anything at this point. The crying stopped immediately. Oh gods. Wilbur put his face in his hands. You're not supposed to say that, Techno. You're never supposed to say that. What? What? Technoblade demanded, panic seeping into his voice for the first time since Wilbur met him. What did I do? What the hell did I do? Tommy sniffled. You said you'll do anything? Realization dawned on Technoblade's face. Well, not anything per se. Tommy's eyes began to water once more. Okay. Technoblade ran his hands across his face in frustration. Fine. One thing, and you'll shut up forever. I want to braid your hair, Tommy said at once. Technoblade blinked. What? What? Wilbur echoed. You once got me to let you ride me like a pony across the castle, and you ask him to let you braid his hair? Tommy nodded, with all the solemnity of a judge announcing someone's death sentence. Wilbur and Technoblade exchanged glances. Technoblade one of bewilderment, and Wilbur one of utmost betrayal. That was how they found themselves, wasting the morning away, sitting together on the damp grass. Wilbur leaned back on his hands and raised his face to the sun, letting the light settle against his skin. He could hear Tommy scurrying around, gathering flowers as the spring breeze blew through the garden. At a moment, all Wilbur could feel was a sudden, all-consuming affection, not for anything in particular, for everything, for the brilliant spinning wheel in the sky turning everything into burnished gold, for the soft dirt beneath his hands, for the air in his lungs and the pollen in his tongue, for the distant sound of his brother's footsteps, for the boy sitting beside him that against all odds Wilbur found he might actually like beyond mere tolerance, for the levity that had started to chase away the more exhausting thoughts. He cracked one eye open and found Technoblade staring at him again with that all too serious look. What? Wilbur asked. Can a man be glad he's not getting tossed around for one morning? Technoblade scoffed. Don't discredit my teaching skills like that. You've been getting tossed around less and less these days. Was that meant as a compliment? None of my compliments will ever be meant. They will be passive-aggressive at best, openly hostile at worst. Oh, of course. We have to pry positive affirmation from your cold dead hands, is it? Is that it? Only way you learn it, Technoblade confirmed. They went silent as another breeze blew past them, blowing Technoblade's unbounded hair across his face. Then, before Wilbur could blink twice about it, he said, "What did you mean before when you told Father tutoring sessions were a distraction? A distraction from what?" Technoblade's expression darkened for a fraction of a second before he scolded it into careful neutrality. He shrugged nonchalantly. "Well, growing boy like you're meant to have hobbies beyond whatever you were doing before." "I read," Wilbur said, "and played music. That was a sufficient distraction, I think." "Not according to Philza." Why do you talk like that, by the way?" Wilbur sniffed and took Technoblade squarely in the eyes. "You call me King Philza. You call the King Philza, which I can excuse because you're, well, you, but Father also calls you an old friend, and I've asked Mother, because Father tells Mother everything, but she never heard of you before. And you all these things about weapons. Wait, heard of you before, and you all these things about weapons and warfare, far too much. Oh, you know all these things about weapons and warfare way too much." You're from a kingdom that has enjoyed peace for decades, Princeling," Technoblade said, with a world's worth of exhaustion in his voice. "Beyond those worlds, it's different. Knowing war young is not entirely uncommon. Kids just grow faster out there. They have to." Wilbur took fistfuls of grass and threw it at Technoblade's face. Technoblade, unamused, simply blew the grass from his face. "Very mature, Your Highness," Technoblade said dryly. Sorry, I can't say Wilbur. You were being all sad again," Wilbur muttered, pulling his knees up to his chin. We looked up just as Tommy came. He looked up just as Tommy came toddling towards them, his arms a bust of color, yellow astromerrials, white daisies, purple malvas, and freesias, the color of Technoblade's hair. "Oh God," Technoblade groaned as Tommy dumped his collection before them proudly. Tommy grinned as he kneeled behind Technoblade. "Dad used to braid Mama's hair all the time before she got tired. He taught me how." Technoblade turned towards Wilbur. "Should I be worried?" "Very," Wilbur said sagely. "At least he doesn't have scissors this time," he added, recalling a particularly incested butler who'd foolishly offered himself to be Tommy's training dummy last year and ended up with less hair than he braided for. That he bargained for. Tommy turned Technoblade's head away from Wilbur. "Hold still," he ordered, beginning to take handfuls of Technoblade's hair, tugging them into place. "Ow," Technoblade said after a particularly harsh pull. "Sorry," Tommy said cheerfully, and began to braid in earnest. Wilbur sat back and watched them in silence, his ferocious tutor and his even more ferocious younger brother. The sunlight seemed to catch in the tangles of Tommy's hair, making it shine like a golden halo. Wilbur had never seen anyone as focused as Tommy was in that moment, working through Technoblade's hair, pausing only to debate what flowers should go where, and Technoblade for his part did not move at all, or let out as much as a word of complaint, even when Tommy took time to educate them all on what exactly each flower meant. "I could write a song about this," Wilbur mused, and then marveled at the thought. It was as if a block he'd been carrying for years lifted, and his art was now inches away from his hands. If only he'd brought his guitar with him today. Tomorrow, he promised himself. I'll write our song tomorrow. There, Tommy said at last, tying the end of the braid of which the red ribbon technoblades often used himself. Wilbur blinked in surprise. Tommy, that's actually good. Really good. Technoblade reached back and ran his hands delicately over the elegant braid and the flowers woven into it. He hummed appraisively, then caught himself before he could fully smile, because he was still Technoblade after all. Decent, in his own was his only comment. I'm not done yet, Tommy said, and produced one more flower, a single yellow rose. This one's my favorite, he added as he greatly tucked the flower behind Technoblade's ear, the one that had the emerald earring that Wilbur had found so familiar, because it means friendship. Technoblade stifled, his mouth open and closed, like he was trying to breathe but forgot how, before he finally said, "Are we friends then?" Tommy stood and brushed grass from his pants. Well, obviously. Obviously? Oh, hey! The sudden excitement in Tommy's tone caught both Technoblade and Wilbur's attention. He began waving to someone in the distance, his smile as bright as life itself. It's Dad and Mama! Mother? Wilbur was on his feet at once, his heart hammering in his chest like a moth set aflame. Sure enough, there was Mother, out in the sun for once more. For the first time in over a year, Wilbur took in a shaky inhale, not daring to breathe again, as if the image before him would dissipate like smoke. Mother smiling at them as she walked arm in arm with Father through the garden. Tommy ran as fast as his tiny legs could carry him, and launched himself into the mother's waiting arms. Wilbur couldn't ignore the brief flash of pain and that flickered over his mother's features as he gathered Tommy into hug, but neither could he help his relief at seeing her walk at all. Well, Technoblade said from behind him. Go ahead then. Wilbur turned to his tutor, and before Technoblade could protest, took him by the wrist and dragged him over to where Mother and Father were waiting. Chat, I can feel something sad happening. So I'm not trying to spoil it because I don't know the story, but we're very far into the chapter, and we have had some some triggers. So I just want you to again know that there are triggers on this chapter. So if you know, be careful and be aware of that. Okay. Anyway, Father's smile was gentle and welcoming, and Wilbur could almost forgive the sadness that remained in his eyes, like a ghost hovering at the edges of celebration. You must be Technoblade, Mother said happily, carrying Tommy in her arms as she addressed the tutor. I do apologize that it was taken us this long to be acquainted, though Phil has been telling me of all you have done for Wilby. Wilbur expected Technoblade's usual icy jabs, and was quite surprised when he bowed his head and what could pass as defense to an untrained eye. It's a pleasure to meet you, Your Majesty. Your sons have told me much about you. Mother gave Technoblade a conspirational grin as she asked, and I trust all they've said is in my favor, yes? Nothing about how sharp my tongue can be when I'm cranky? Oh, I assure you, they've painted you as nothing less than perfect. Technoblade glanced at Father, although Philza might have said a thing or two about you rigid standards for tea. Father chuckled. He pressed closer to Mother and Tommy, keeping an arm around Mother's waist, as if to steady her, as if to hold her together. Just a little bit longer. I told you that in confidence, Techno. Technoblade, Mother repeated. That's a rather odd name. I said the same thing, Tommy added brightly, always eager to be part of the adults' conversation. Technoblade only shrugged, once again demonstrating a level of civility that Wilbur would never be expected. A level of civility that Wilbur would never have expected of the same man that regularly combated the king's orders. I would feel too much like a traitor if I abandoned it now. After all these years with it, it's my one inconsistent companion, more loyal than most. Loyalty is a rather precious gift, Mother sighed softly. She transferred Tommy to one arm and reached out with the other until she was cupping Technoblade's cheek. I do hope my boy, she continued, her voice as tranquil as a still lake, that you will find the people you can trust more than your own name. You deserve that, and more for all you have done for my family. You deserve that and more for all you have done for my family. Technoblade blinked slowly at her, for once struck speechless. Tommy giggled. Techno is blushing. I'm not. Technoblade spat hotly. Yes, you are, Tommy cooled, leaning back into Mother's arm, safe in the belief that she would never drop him. You so are. Tommy, don't torture the poor child, Mother said, even as she giggled herself. Will? Father reached out and ruffled Wilbur's hair playfully. You look 100 miles away. Wilbur exhaled slowly. I'm just remembering. Remembering what? This, Mother's soft smile. Tommy's cheery laugh. Technoblade's half-hearted protest. Father's hand on his head. Everything. Nothing, Wilbur said. Forget I said anything. He smiled at his father for once, without reservation. He had never felt so light. He was almost a son again. Would you like to watch Techno and I spare? Father's expression softened. Of course, I would be delighted to. It was the last good day. Okay, chat. The last good day, huh? It was the last good day. The knock came at midnight. It dragged Wilbur from the comfort of dreamless sleep. Wilbur, Technoblade's voice, urgent, almost angry. Wilbur, open the door. Wilbur threw off his covers and bolted for the door. Technoblade stood aside his bedchambers, his red eyes blazing in the dark. He said the 3 words that would come to haunt Wilbur until the day he died. It's your mother. They ran through the castle. Wilbur, for the first time, outpacing his tutor, they arrived at the long hallway that led to his parents' bedchambers, already choked with servants. Move, Technoblade demanded, his voice booming over the din. Move or I will make you. The servants rushed to the sides. We need music for this. Okay. Servants rushed to the sides, clearing a path for Wilbur and Technoblade. Wilbur couldn't register any of the faces or their voices. All there was silence, until the worst sound Wilbur had ever heard. An anguished cry that tortured Wilbur's blood cold. Tommy's here. He burst into the room and found his brother curled into a ball by the foot of the bed where his mother laid, sleeping. No, not sleeping. Not sleeping. Wilbur could not breathe. Tommy was still crying for their mother, for their father. Father! Wilbur's eyes scanned the room, but there was no trace of the king, no trace of the man who had just lost his wife. Tommy! Technoblade pushed past Wilbur into the room. Wilbur could see it all, but it felt like watching someone else's life happen from the leagues under the sea. Everything happened too slowly, too distantly. Technoblade kneeling by his brother, praying him off the cold floor. Tommy wrapping his arms around Technoblade's neck, burying his head into the shoulders and screaming. Screaming so loud, so loud, so loud. Technoblade turning towards Wilbur, handing him something, pressing it into Wilbur's cold fingers. Wilbur looked down at his hands. It was a letter. Crumbled, tear-stained by his own tears, he realized blatantly. Techno, it said, tell the boys I'm sorry, and tell Wilbur he will be a better king than I ever was. The world fell out from under Wilbur's feet, leaving him suspended in the air, free falling with no true end. No, he thought, or maybe said, or maybe screamed, no, 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 this wasn't how it's supposed to go. Oh, said the voices, but this already happened before. Wilbur blinked and blinked again. Father's gone, he said, not taking his eyes from the letter. He left. Wilbur, Technoblade's voice raising above Tommy's agonized sobbing, was that worry in the boy's voice? I found the letter slipped under my door, and by the time I came here it was too late. Your mother, she was also gone. The letter began to shake violently, or not the letter, Wilbur's hands. But she was just there. This morning she was to spare. She was smiling. She was alive. Technoblade, Techno. This was invertible. Wilbur crammed his hands over his ears. This is too happy. Shut up. It was meant to be. Go away! Wilbur fell to his knees, pressing his hands tighter and tighter to block out the sound. I thought I'd gotten rid of you, and you said you were going to leave me alone. A sudden pain laced up Wilbur's arm, and he opened his eyes to find Technoblade kneeling in front of him, his hand an iron grip around Wilbur's wrist. Tommy was gone. When did this happen? And the silence he left behind was almost as bad as the screaming. Come back to me, Wilbur, Technoblade ordered. Do you hear? You, Wilbur said haltingly. He was not for his act, not for his stage, and the voices. Technoblade nodded, easing his grip on Wilbur's wrist. I can help you. No, he can't. No, no one can. Wilbur squeezed his eyes shut, but all he could see was his mother's still form, father's letter. Wilbur, look at me. Wilbur shook his head. I can't. Then listen to me. I can help you. Technoblade repeated firmly, because I have voices too. Wilbur's lungs began to ache. The quickness of his breath began to ache with the quickness of his breath. Do you? He sounded like a child seeking comfort with a distant figure, but there was too much pain to make room for the shame. I do, Technoblade said. So breathe with me until they go away and we can figure out the next step together. That was all they did. They breathed in and out and in again. Technoblade's hand in his wrist and this sickly sweet smell of rotting flowers keeping him rooted to the ground, to the universe. In and out and in again. And in between the breath and the next, Wilbur finally remembered where he'd heard the name Technoblade before. Father, Wilbur swallowed down a sob. He told me a story once, when I was young, the first time the voices ever talked to me. He told me a story about an immortal god who was doomed to hear voices in his head forever. A blood god. Technoblade, you're a god! Don't worry about that now. His voice was distant, but kind. It doesn't matter. But I don't remember how the story ended. Exhaustion was a heavy blanket, weighing him down until he was leaning on Technoblade's shoulder. His throat felt raw, like he'd eaten broken glass. This story has no end, the voices said, but they sound distant too. Tell me how the story ends, Wilbur begged, even as he felt the last of his consciousness slowly fracture into nothingness. Tell me you'll still be here when I close the book. Wilbur, Technoblade mumbled, something too low to hear, and then he said, "Okay, I'll be here." Wilbur wanted to say more, or perhaps he didn't. Outside, somewhere far away, bells began to toll, chimming his mother's death ballad, heralding his ascension. "Tell the boys I'm sorry," his father's voice, this time as quiet as the rest. In between one breath and the next, Wilbur was a king. In between one breath and the next, he was asleep.